TAM TUK by George Adams. Continued. Chapter 19. My parents never came to see me. In my vacations, I spent time with my friends' parents' homes, sleeping in university student dorms, and eating sandwiches from Subway. My parents never gave me enough money, not because they didn't have it, they just forgot to send me any mostly, and I was too proud to ask. I suppose I learnt then to appreciate very small things in life. My favourite places at that time became Bristol and Edinburgh. I was fascinated by Western boys who would whistle at me and my friend as we crossed the road. It was all very new and strange to me. Some men we met took me to be Japanese, as the UK seems to attract only a certain kind of very ordinary Chinese girl. I wasn't ordinary by that time, I must say. I had grown and grown. Some people said I was gorgeous, but at that time it is one of those words people were fond of using. The English had no idea of a Chinese girl except as something weird and oriental in the extreme. If I was wearing a skirt, I was approached by all kinds of men, even when doing harmless things like waiting at a railway station. The usual aim was to get my phone number, which I used to give out just to be friendly. I quickly found out that it was dreadful to do so. In Hong Kong sometimes, on several occasions anyway, dirty old men, and one not so old, approached me in the street and made indecent suggestions, even though I wasn't wearing makeup and was dressed in a very ordinary way. I learned to live with it. I suppose I turned into something attractive to men. I always remember my Oxford interview. I got to St. Edmund Hall at 9 o'clock in the morning, and a friendly middle-aged woman talked to me about my life for 45 minutes. I'd applied to study law, whilst most of my Chinese friends at school had chosen medicine or accountancy. Only a few friends, all Western girls, had chosen to study English or modern languages. I chose law, not because I wanted to be like my father, because I wanted to be better than him. I wanted to prove that you could do something with law rather than help people sign documents and collect fees and secure property. I was also a little outraged by what I now saw to be the horrible injustice and corruption of Hong Kong. Does that seem strange to you? I don't think so. I had learnt to hate my parents. No, I didn't despise them. Graham Greene says you can only really hate your equals. You despise everyone else. But I believe that if you despise anyone strongly enough, and you've seen what they have tried to do to you, you end up hating them. Despising them isn't enough. People like my father and mother don't care anyway if someone despises them. They don't care much if someone hates them. They care slightly more, though, if someone does hate them, as that person may turn out to be dangerous one day. I got into Oxford. I don't know how. As far as I can see, all the men and girls who applied to Oxford at my interview were all star students. I think Oxford selects on whether they like your face, or whether your face fits. Fortunately, I have what people say is a very pretty face, but as I told you, that doesn't make you happy as a matter of course. You just have to live with it. Everyone thinks you're some kind of bimbo, and it's useful to play that sometimes, but it's never real. I fitted into Oxford rather well. St. Edmund Hall is a small and rather crowded place, a tiny quadrangle with towering blocks of student quarters behind it. It can be too cosy for comfort, and sometimes it was hard to get any work done. There was always so much going on. But I made a deal with myself that I wanted to leave the place with a decent law degree rather than a congratulatory third, although the lure of Pimm's, strawberries and cream, hall balls and 8's week was strong. Curious thing to tell you, I went to a meeting of the China Society one evening. It was a nice get-together with dim sum on sticks and jasmine tea in New College, which meant we had a bit of room to walk about in. There was a big-wig civil servant over from Hong Kong talking about the dangers of globalization, and my God, was he boring. I felt slightly ashamed about his English too. The rest were the kind of people I expected to see at such gatherings. Students from Hong Kong and China mainly, and lovers of the vibrant Orient who are planning trips to China in order to become wise and profound with a backpack and a copy of the Lonely Planet Guide or Paul Theroux's Riding the Iron Rooster in their hands. Then, outside in the quad, just as everyone was preparing to go home and the bodyguards buzzed about for the visiting bigwig and whispered into their sleeves, I was approached by this strange man in a fawn overcoat and a trilby who looked like something out of a Bolting Brothers comedy. I couldn't tell whether he was putting it on or whether it really was the way he was, but you meet a lot of people like that at Oxford. Young people who wear cloaks, cravats, or smoke cigarettes through holders. It's part of the scene. But this one was serious. He said he was in business in Hong Kong and was always looking for contacts. No matter how little I knew about business, that wasn't a problem. He was willing to pay for any kind of research paper which said anything significant about the place. Useful way of paying off the student loan and that kind of thing. Could lead to some good contacts of his own, and would I give him a call? Perhaps he could ask me over to the Randolph for lunch the day after. Nothing ulterior, you know. Strictly business. So I turned up at the Randolph because I often did things like that at that time, and it was only lunch, and I had to eat lunch anyway. All meals were kind of drab. Nothing drab about Mr. Finch. He did himself very well indeed, and it was all glittering silver and crisp napkins at a window seat opposite the Taylor Institution. I remember thinking him something of a cad, you know, the type with a dozen blondes in the Edgware Road or shares in massage parlours. Then I got it. He reminded me of Alec Guinness in that film set in Haiti, the Comedians. The one who says he's an arms dealer, but he's really a cheat. I was pretty sure he didn't do business with Hong Kong. He knew Hong Kong well, but it was all Foreign Correspondence Club, the British Council, and trains up to Shenzhen to meet people, but he never explained what the people did exactly. He did have a business card, Hong Kong International Investments, and it looked as vague and as dubious as he was. I suddenly had an idea. The aim of giving me this silly old man was not to recruit me into British or some other intelligence. It was to see if I wanted to be recruited by someone at all, or to see if I was really an agent for the other side. If I were an agent, I would have gone along with the invitation and played a gorgeous double game with MI5 or whomever. If I declined, it meant I may be harmless and above board or working for the Chinese. As far as I could see, it was mainly an intelligence test, as in IQ. If you are not capable of seeing through the silly facade of Mr. Finch, you are of no use to anyone much. I think I passed with flying colours, as I never saw Mr. Finch again. Nice lunch, though. The other thing to tell you about Oxford, apart from the fact that I got a unvivered first, but without a star for distinction, was the wandering hands of the dons. Hard to believe when you consider how many of them are confirmed bachelors. A nice way of saying that they're as queer as coots. One man in the law department was one of those queers in cavalry twills and brogues and a tweed jacket. You didn't know whether he was an old guy pretending to look young or a young guy trying to look older. He had his eyes solidly on my tutorial partner's crotch the whole hour we were with him, but then mostly my tutorial partners were young men. I was very popular with my fellow law undergrads. Young lawyers always give me the willies, so there was nothing doing there. Someone said that lawyers are permanent 6-year-olds, though little professor inside, forever preserved in all its stunning and precocious brightness. For me, they are mainly people without any charm. The fundamentals of charm are vulnerability and, a certain precociousness, I suppose, a precocious brightness. The fundamentals of charm are vulnerability, though, and mystery, to be honest. Lawyers like to think they're invulnerable and as clear as crystal. The wandering hands of the dons came in strange ways. Invites to their expansive mansions in North London or North Oxford, to peruse old cases in leather-bound volumes, whilst my sherry glass was filled every 2 minutes and the wife was down in London or in Oxford, spending all his money. Or there was the feigned interest in the Far East or reminiscences of the same. Many wanted me to teach them Chinese, but I always told them my Mandarin was zilch, which was perfectly true. That fact didn't put most of them off, though, and there's something really pathetic and wildly funny about a brilliant mind trying to get his voice around Cantonese tones just because he wants a bit of Oriental leg-over, the hard way. Then I met Alex. He was up in Oxford trying to get through his A-levels at a dreadful tutorial school next to Carfax. Rather than ask my parents for more money, I decided to get a job there. He was everything you could possibly want from a beau at Oxford. He had a car, nice flat, and he stopped the guys pursuing you, as he was insanely jealous, built like young Schwarzenegger. He spent nearly all day at the gym. Once I'd been seen with him a few times, the assumption was that I wasn't interested in Europeans, which was far from true. I wasn't really interested in anyone. Although Alex was as intellectually stimulating as an episode of the Gilmore Girls, he was a great source of information. He told me things. He said Hong Kong was ruled by other things than law, but that I should be studying martial arts and economics if I really wanted to get to the heart of things. He told me about his family. His father had a shop which didn't really do any business because he didn't need to. He lived off the rents of various properties he owned. In the 1930s, Stanley was a sleepy little fishing village with a garrison of soldiers on the peninsula. Although the indigenous villagers of the new territories had been squeezing land and other privileges out of the colonial government for years, no one had really tried it on in Stanley. The only indigenous people there were a few families of bandits and pirates which had been washed up during the Opium Wars. The Sungs were neither, as they had migrated from the pig farms of Canton, largely because they had lost their holdings to some vicious landlords. They pleaded with the district officer, and at last several of the male members of the clan got 700-square-foot plots to build on. The buildings later had shops below them, and the rooms were rented out to families, so the income was substantial in the end. Most of the Sungs preferred to live on subsidized housing estates. They used most of their income to buy more buildings, and in the war years they willingly let some of them out to the Eurasians and Japanese soldiers looking for a more comfortable billet. Old Mr. Sung used to poke vegetables through the wire of Stanley internment camp and was paid with jewellery and odd bits of gold. He always said that his vegetables were sold below market price, and that was as close as anyone in the Sung clan got to idealism. After the war, they were first in line at all the compensation hearings, and even hired a lawyer in Tokyo to sue the Japanese for all the damage they had left behind and the stacks of worthless banknotes they had given them. When the 1960s arrived, the Sungs were the grandees of Stanley, and many of them headed the Kaifeng Association. A few mixed with triads, but the latter had never really taken hold in Stanley, as it was too remote a place and had none of the quick outlets for cash, gambling, brothels and opium dens. It was about this time that the feud started with the Chows of North Point, who had bought a house close to one of the Sung's properties and had sued the Sungs with their dilapidated property when it had caved in and left a hole in the wall. The Sungs never maintained any of their properties and were even proud of the fact they knew a local team of job builders who could do wonders patching up a flat before the tenants moved in, literally filling up the holes in everything with newspaper and plastering and painting over the top. In the 60s, all the building inspectors were tea-money men who often didn't even turn up to sign the documents. By the 90s, the buildings were all worth a fortune, and as the portable phone companies had all been persuaded by the Kaifeng to site their transponders on the top of Sung properties and paid swinging rents for the privilege, they were doing very nicely. All this talk disgusted me in a way, but I was more disgusted when I heard about how my mother operated. She was the Triad's mouthpiece, one of the main ones at any rate. The Triads had always been 1 foot away from the Communist Party, who sometimes described them as patriotic. The Communists had done many deals with them in Canton and in Hong Kong during the war years to ensure supplies of armaments and to get hold of hard currency. So had the British, incidentally. As Hong Kong approached the handover, the mainland had a different strategy. It wanted to form an alliance between the Triads and a political front organisation to run Hong Kong behind the scenes. The political party would campaign in the old heartlands of mainland supporters, Kowloon City and Western and North Point, and the Triads would provide enforcement and all the slush money. Every time a new development went up, the shops and stalls would be handed out to the political organisation supporters. Step by step, they would run Hong Kong from the shops and stalls, and the Triads would continue to rule the minibuses and taxis and brothels and nightclubs. Old Mr. Sung had seen off the Triads in Stanley on a number of occasions, and once it became clear that the Chows were the mouthpieces in legal and political terms for the Sunnion Triad, he was revolted, not out of a sense of idealism, but because the Triads had taken sides with his old enemy. Nevertheless, he played along with them and had no real objection to their winning elections in Stanley. He knew that elections were rather meaningless in Hong Kong anyway, as it has never had a real democracy up and running. Real power lay with the landlords and the intricate ties of the clansmen. Old Sung certainly had that little world in Stanley practically all to himself. But I'm getting sidetracked. I want to tell you more about myself. Let's have lunch now, and then I'll tell you more.